Welcome back, guys, to another Let's Build. Today I'm going to be building Delian Tomb, Matt Colville's map from his Running the Game series. Matt illustrates how you can build a small dungeon, wrap it in a story, and create an entire game session with just a little bit of work. I chose to do this map mostly because I adore Matt's videos, and the simplicity of this dungeon gives me an opportunity to really talk about some Wildshape tips without getting lost in a giant dungeon build. This animated battle map is already available and released, so this is a recap on how I built it. Without further delay, let's build. The first thing I want to talk about is importing objects. Sometimes when you want to be really accurate, it's helpful to pull in the official map. In this case, it was pretty unnecessary as I could have easily created this tomb by sight. Once an image of a map is imported, remember to align your grid. Hopefully you won't struggle as much as I did aligning it. A good tip, switch to orthographic view. It makes aligning the grid much easier. There's two ways in Wildshape you can create a dungeon that's below ground level. You can either dig it out first, or build a dungeon and then build all the ground up around it. I found the latter to be easier. Once a dungeon is built, I just matched the ground height to the height of the walls and then filled it in. Wildshape, and really Unity in general, has a limitation to terrain in that it doesn't allow you to make a completely 90-degree drop in terrain. Because of that, we end up with that ever so slight slope. Thickening up the walls helps cover this up. Textures are a vital part of good map design, probably the most important aspect of making really realistic looking maps. I experiment constantly with different ways to mix textures and blend them to create different effects. For this map, I was trying to make it obvious that the dungeon was underground by creating a kind of cutout look in the dirt around the walls. I also spent some time applying different grass and greenery textures to the surrounding forests so it looks more realistic. I like to use darker green textures below the trees to give the appearance of fallen leaves and moss, which might grow in a forest floor but not as common in the open areas. For the entrance to the tomb, I wanted to create a rock entry. You'll see me raise the height of the terrain here because when I go to add rock, I can easily place it up the sides of the terrain instead of having to worry about individual elevations of the rocks as I place them. I was pretty happy with the way this looked in 3D, but for the top-down view it was a bit unclear what was going on here, so I ended up removing the top of the rock arch so you could see the path through it. For paths, whether they are through a forest or through a city, I like to lower the terrain slightly as I think it can give a pretty realistic shadowing depending on where the sun is. Not to mention textures tend to react differently depending on the shape of the terrain you're painting them on. Always be sure to use the objects at your disposal. A forest would have random stone, branches, and the occasional stump, as well as some tall patches of grass. Feel free to go crazy placing them, and don't stress the placement. Use random rotation, don't pile things up unnaturally. When the map is done, it will all look great together. The dungeon is intended to be underground, so we don't want sunlight shining in. I use a shadow object and sink it to the ground level, creating a darkened dungeon. I will then go back through and add some bluish light as a personal preference. I just think subterranean areas have a kind of bluish hue to them. And that's it, guys. Matt Colville's Delian Tomb. Let's see how we did.